Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. I'm Isla Garcia, master's degree of nutrition science and registered dietitian, and I'm going to make weight loss realistic, sustainable, and uncomplicated for your busy lifestyle. On this podcast, me and my team of registered dietitians will decipher the latest nutrition research, dissect fad diets, and discuss social media trends for you so you can feel confident knowing what to eat to achieve your health goals. Research suggests that most weight loss programs aren't successful, but my experience has taught me that this is not because the participants aren't committed. It's because those diets are designed by non-nutrition professionals and center around severe restrictions. We are here to provide the facts about the science of weight loss so you can have the success you want and continue living your best life. Welcome back to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. My name is Isla, your founder, CEO, and host of the podcast. Welcome back, Lacey. She's been gone forever. Today, she's gonna catch us up on everything, and then also we're gonna cover a topic that is kind of down to the basics. We're going to talk all about heart stuff, heart disease, hypertension, cholesterol, which I always kind of thought was like an old person's disease, but now we're starting to become old people and a lot of our clients have it. I know I have high cholesterol, so it's always interesting to me. So I thought Lacey would be the best to cover this, but thank you so much for joining us, Lacey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so great to be back. And this is definitely a topic that I'm super passionate about. I see so many patients and just people of all ages. It's definitely not just older people of all ages trying to work on heart health. So I definitely think this is a great topic and something that's really important to cover, whether you're on our program or just listening in for health and all of that.
Well, tell me what is new in your life.
Well, I have a newborn,
Yeah.
which has been super great. He's 8 weeks old. He's honestly like the best, the cutest. I know I'm biased because I'm his mom, but it's been really, really great. Definitely like a whirlwind of the past few months, but it's just been also really, really good. So yeah, I've really been loving being a mom.
Yeah. And you had him in what, November?
Yes, November. He was actually born on Thanksgiving at 1 a.m.
What?
So I had a little Thanksgiving baby. I had a really long labor, so we thought he was coming earlier, but then it kind of ended up being on Thanksgiving. So yeah, we had like a really happy holidays, and he was here for his first Christmas, which was really cool too.
Oh, well, anything like tying in like nutrition that has been surprising about motherhood, because now you can kind of like offer all this advice that I can't even offer.
Yes, definitely probably need like another month before I can start giving out like mom advice. Because those first 2 months definitely are like a pure adjustment, which I think has been a big surprise for me because I'm totally like a meal planner, a meal prepper, and that's just kind of like fallen out the window for me. So I'm really relying on those like healthy, convenient options that I
Mm.
like to talk with my clients about when they're not really super into meal prepping. So that's something that's shifted for me just because I'm used to cooking like pretty much every meal for myself. And now I'm doing like a lot of the protein shakes and the Greek yogurt and
Mm.
like the bag salads and honestly like going into my freezer stash. So yeah, anything that's convenient has been like my best friend with nutrition. And just like even remembering to eat is really hard. I know that like sounds crazy, but you're just like doing so much for the baby that like remembering to eat and drink is like definitely a challenge. So I wish I had like three more hands because I'll be like doing something and I'm thirsty, but my water bottle's on somewhere else in the house. So that's definitely been an adjustment too, but definitely, figuring all of it out.
Cool. Okay, so you're saying that like you've been like just like adjusting to motherhood has caused you to like not remember to eat. Is this whenever you were when we talked last time and you were saying you were pregnant, you were saying that you were having like a hard time with eating. Did you like get over
Mm,
that once the baby
yeah.
came, or was that oh, okay?
Yeah, so that lasted I was, like, really nauseous for I think it lasted till, like, 21 weeks. It was longer than most people, but, then I was, like, fine with eating, and I had, like, my regular meals and stuff, like, no weird appetite stuff, and now, like, I'm definitely I think your appetite I'm breastfeeding, so when you're breastfeeding, your appetite's higher, but, it's just hard to even, like, sit down and have a meal, so, that's definitely been an adjustment too. So again, like instead of what I would used to do, like meal prepping and grocery shopping and all of that, like just having those convenient things on hand has been really helpful. And I've really been utilizing the grocery pickup too at the grocery store because I can just like order it on my phone and then go pick it up instead of having to like get out of the car and do the whole grocery run. So that's been really awesome too.
Well, good. I hope those are some good tips coming from a dietitian herself to make you not feel bad about having to use all those options.
Yes, totally, I know. Protein like, I have a protein shake every morning because I can drink it and I can do it while I'm doing something else, so, that's been, like, super helpful and most convenient.
Well, kind of moving into our article, a sad article, but does relate a lot to kind of what we're talking to about today. And it's all about how Lisa Marie dies of cardiac arrest. She's a third generation of heart disease. Let me pull up the article. It's from People, so a little bit more of a mainstream article source. But we're recording this in late January, and Lisa Marie did just die, unfortunately. But it's interesting that both her dad, and her grandma had died from like heart complications. So there is some sort of maybe genetic linkage. What was your thoughts like around thinking like that all these three generations had like died from heart problems?
It's so, so sad, and I definitely think, when it comes to heart disease, like, there's so many factors and so many risk factors, and, unfortunately, family history is really strong,
Mhm.
and so I think that definitely, like, shows to be, like, a factor here, and, super sad that a lot of the deaths in their family were younger, and so sometimes those can't be necessarily helped, but obviously we have lots of risk factors, so, the genetic component seems to be pretty strong.
When there is a genetic component, is there anything you can do about it? Or is it like, well, I have a predisposition to heart disease, so whatever, I might as well live my life?
I'll definitely dig into this a little bit more, but when it comes to heart disease and all of our different types of heart disease, there are several risk factors. Genetics is one of them, and I always tell my patients, we can't change the genes, and they'll tell me, like I have all these family members who have heart disease, and my dad passed away, or aunts or uncles, but we have so many other factors that we can control, and so just because we have a genetic predisposition that might put us more at a risk. But we have a lot of other things that we can try and work on to kind of hopefully mitigate that. Yeah, I'm not sure in her case, like exactly what everything was like going on, but it seems just because like there was so much of that history in her family that she was pretty predisposed to it.
Okay, and then it said that she actually died of cardiac arrest. Can you tell us what that means or what that is?
Yeah, so she cardiac arrest as opposed to like a heart attack. Cardiac arrest is when a person heart like completely stops pumping, and that's typically caused by an arrhythmia. Sometimes the cause is unknown, but there are again all of those risk factors involved. So heart disease and heart attack can be related to that. But the arrest is when like your heart just completely stops pumping. So it looked like from that article, they still weren't exactly sure the
Mhm.
reason why she had cardiac arrest. They're still kind of like looking into it. So I'm not sure if they'll be able to like say exactly why.
Yeah, does it have to do you know if heart disease heart stuff, I'm actually gonna ask you genuine questions because I always get super
Yeah.
complicated with, like, fats and
Yeah.
heart stuff. Does that have anything to do with, like, hypertension or heart disease, or is it, like, a whole separate thing?
Yeah, so heart attacks and hypertension and heart disease and all of that can be a risk factor for cardiac arrest.
Oh, okay.
Are related in that way. It is confusing because there's so many different types, and I think today we're pretty much going to cover like coronary artery disease, which is like the main, most common one, but that can definitely be a risk factor for an arrhythmia like that.
So is it fair to say then, like, if you have this, heart disease, then, like, it would be if you work on treating that, you could decrease your risk for cardiac arrest? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. So cardiac arrest risk factors would be having like coronary artery disease, heart failure, any sort of heart damage, different types of arrhythmia, and risk factors for arrhythmias could be excessive alcohol intake, lack of activity, and then like exerting yourself. All of a sudden, drug use, excess caffeine, stress, family history, all of that. So because that coronary artery disease part is a risk factor for cardiac arrest and arrhythmia. When you have things like high blood pressure, hypertension, those kind of relate to that, which in turn is kind of a risk factor for cardiac arrest, if that makes
Gotcha,
sense.
gotcha. And then
Yeah, they're kind of all intertwined.
her dad, Elvis, died of the same thing, but it's
Yeah.
maybe more related to, like, drug use. Is that right? Do we think?
Yeah, so this article was saying that his was a cardiac arrhythmia with ventricle fibrillation, and it looked like he had like the clogged arteries, high blood pressure, and addiction to opioids, which is what
Mhm.
that article was saying. So, again, like the coronary artery disease with the clogged arteries, high blood pressure, and that drug use probably all related to, all kind of influence the cardiac arrest that he had. So I don't know. It's hard to say what happened with her, but of course, having that genetic component too, and with genetic components, I mean, there are certain genes and family history that plays into a role. But I also believe, what your family, the behaviors your family has, also kind of carry on as well. And so, some things it's hard to say whether it's like true genes or if it's lifestyle. Again, that lifestyle part. So, all of those things, and that's kind of why heart disease is such a important topic to talk about and discuss, because there are so many things that can, impact it, and so many of those pieces we can work on trying to control to prevent.
Do you love our realistic approach on nutrition but want to dive a little bit deeper? Let me tell you about the Millennial Living Membership Program. This was designed to help you stay motivated and inspired no matter what health journey you're on. We develop monthly nutrition and fitness challenges with prizes you can win if you stick with it to help motivate you through every month. To inspire you, we upload weekly recipes with downloadable food lists, monthly food demos, and we can even have a registered dietitian answer your questions on nutrition and weight loss. Our members form a community with other like-minded people to help support each other on their health journey. If you are seeking a way to stay motivated throughout your health journey with our method in mind, try signing up for the Millennial Living Membership Program for the first 2 weeks free by signing up on our website at themillennialnutritionist.com. So let's dive into what we can control to prevent, starting off with our first kind of like basic question I was thinking of is like, why should we care about heart disease? Like, did you basically already say it, or is there any other information? Because I feel like so many people think of it like as the old person disease.
Yeah.
But why should we care? Why should millennials care about it now?
Yeah, we should definitely care about it, because I think, for one, like, it's really not too late to start taking care of your heart. I mean, like I said, I have patients from the age of like 10 who have high cholesterol, which again could be familial, to like the age of 95, right? And so it can impact us at any point. Just because you have high cholesterol at a young age doesn't mean you're going to have a heart attack now, but it will decrease your risk of having one in the future, or having any sort of heart problem in the future. And heart disease is the number one cause of death in the US. So it's really, really common. And it's, of course, something that we should definitely be worried about. And if you think about it, like, if your heart's not healthy, how can the rest of your body really be healthy? So I think it's super important to talk about now and to worry about. And of course, as we're like going into our upper 20s and 30s, if you're a millennial, now is the time that, we should be looking at our blood work every year and getting those labs drawn, because you can have high cholesterol even in your 20s, or elevated A1C, all of those things. If you have a family history, it's definitely, more important to like get those labs done every year, but obviously make sure to get them done, because yeah, we just want to catch it early and do all of the things that we need to do to kind of prevent you from having a chronic issue later on, because it's going to be a lot harder once it gets a little worse.
Yes. Let's dive into what actually is heart disease. So I actually don't even know the answer to this question. Can you tell me what actually is heart disease? Like, how do you define it?
I would say heart disease is anything, or any type of disease that is affecting like the heart, the arteries, the veins, any part of that cardiovascular system. And there are actually lots of different types of heart disease. I think the main one that I kind of wanted to address today would be coronary artery disease, which is the disease that kind of impacts that blockage, and impacts the ability for blood to flow through our body properly. And that one's really one that we can impact a lot with nutrition and lifestyle. So yeah, the kind of an umbrella term, but there's lots of different categories underneath. And I would say coronary artery disease is the most common, or one of the most common. And so that's one that I thought we could kind of focus on today.
Does hypertension relate to any of these heart diseases, or is that like a whole separate thing?
Yes, so
Okay.
hypertension definitely relates. Hypertension is kind of a fancy way of saying high blood pressure. So you can have like pre-hypertension, hypertension, and that just means your blood pressure is elevated. That can be related to diet, again, genetics, any type of your lifestyle. And when we have high blood pressure, that just puts a lot of stress on our arteries and our veins. And so that in turn can cause damage. It makes them less elastic. And so when we have that damage, it just can cause heart problems, and it can cause that plaque to build up in your artery walls, which again would put us at a higher risk of heart disease. So, yes, high blood pressure is definitely something that we would want to work on if that was something you were struggling with, or getting that under control is really helpful for your heart and the rest of your body too.
Yeah, I know a lot of the clients I've worked with, they do have high hypertension. I have some friends that have that too, or high blood pressure. And a lot of them don't think it's a big deal because I guess you don't really feel the impact day to day. I mean, the same with high cholesterol. You probably can't really feel like you have it. But then if like all of a sudden you don't ever take care of it, it sounds like it turns into like a really bad thing. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and I would say, if you have the, hypertension, and, it would be that, like, coupled with other things like high cholesterol or high triglycerides, high A1C, all of those things, like, as a combination would definitely be something that could cause a heart problem later on, but because hypertension is so connected to heart disease, I would definitely say that would be something that we'd wanna work on, or something that you'd wanna work on, and there's lots of ways that you can do that through your diet and your lifestyle too. So that one, you can also go on medication, which again we can talk about. But typically, what I see, if you're young, if you're in your 20s or 30s, working on nutrition first is definitely the way to go.
Okay. And then high cholesterol, how does that feed into all of this heart disease stuff?
We have lots of different types of cholesterol in our body. The main ones that we look at are our LDL cholesterol and our HDL cholesterol. So our LDL cholesterol is kind of that like lousy one that we want to be low or lower. That one is definitely going to put us at a higher risk of developing heart disease and that plaque buildup if it's high. And so it can be high for lots of different reasons. We could have the family history, and some people just their liver produces more cholesterol. And they just have it more of it floating around in their body, and that can just be something that's genetic. You can also be impacted by high intake of saturated fat, lack of exercise, low fiber diet, things like that. So if you had high cholesterol, that's something that we would work on through, decreasing the fat, that those like less healthy fats in your diet, and increasing your fiber, your exercise, things like that. Your HDL is actually really helpful. We want that one to be higher because HDL really helps our body reduce that plaque and reduce that LDL plaque buildup. So when we want to increase our HDL, we can exercise more, eat healthy fats. So the cholesterol part is kind of what is related to that plaque buildup that you might see if someone had a blockage or a partial
Mhm.
blockage. That would be something we'd want to address. And if you go to the doctor and they do like a metabolic panel, typically they'll test for your lipid panel, which is all of those different ones.
So again, it sounds like another thing we can work on or problem we can work on that can potentially prevent a pretty bad situation later on, like death, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, if someone has a really, really high cholesterol coupled with like hypertension, or they're a
Mhm.
smoker, or we have high A1C damage to those arteries and veins, that would definitely be something that would put you at an elevated risk of heart attack, stroke, things like that.
And then the last disease kind of question I had under heart disease was CHF, or I always forget actually what this stands for because I always know that it stands for something. I always think it's coronary heart failure, but I know it's not that either, chronic heart failure or something like that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't know if
Or
many people
chronic
our
heart.
age are going to have this, but they might have parents who have had it or grandparents who have died. So can you just clarify what the difference between that one is and the rest of them?
Heart failure would be just when your heart has some sort of like damage or it can't really pump the blood adequately throughout your system. So typically, when I have patients with heart failure, they have a really hard time retaining fluid. You can have fluid buildup in your lungs just because your heart cannot pump that blood adequately. And that could be a result of a lot of things. Again, like all of those risk factors. I think a lot of times I would see that in someone who has had like some sort of heart event and they, as a result, had some sort of damage to their heart. And so it just pumps a little bit less effectively. And we typically look at the ejection fraction of your heart to see kind of how well your heart is pumping. And with a heart failure patient, you're right. Typically, we wouldn't see that early in life, but later on, that could be something you'd be at risk for if you had all of these other things.
Is that another genetically related one or not?
Yeah, so I would say all of them would be like have some sort of genetic component, just because the risk factors are really similar for all of them.
Okay.
And so, yeah, if you like genetically were predisposed to other types of heart disease, then the heart failure could kind of come along after that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, some stats that I found that I thought were crazy. I mean, I guess I always knew this, but being out of the hospital for so long, just from the CDC, it said that one person dies every 34 seconds in the United States from heart disease, which is crazy. And it says about 697,000 people in the United States died from heart disease in 2020, and that's about one in every five deaths, which is crazy. Do you feel like
Shocking.
can you like, do you feel like that's real or like how would that make sense? Just because so many people have, I don't know, diets that end up leading to heart disease or just genetically predisposed? Like, why is it so common, I guess?
So the main risk factors that we look for in my job, or what I look for in my patients who have had a heart event, we look at stress, we look at BMI or their weight, whether or not they have diabetes and how well controlled it is, lack of physical activity, if they have hypertension, if they have high any type of hyperlipidemia or high cholesterol or triglycerides, family history, and smoking. So
Mhm.
if you think about it, that's quite a bit, like quite a wide range of things that could put you at risk for heart disease. And so, um, as far as the US, I mean, as a dietitian, I obviously look at the nutrition side. So
Mhm.
I see we have, lots of fast food, lots of unhealthy foods that are really easily accessible to us. Our country here, we have a lot of like red meat and saturated fat that we eat. Even in like processed foods, they add a lot of those saturated fats and sodium that can definitely contribute to all of that. Generally, lower physical activity if you have a job where you're really sedentary. Stress is a huge piece of this too. Smoking. So, just with heart disease, because we have so many different things that can put us at risk, I think that's probably one of the main reasons why it's so common,
Mhm.
because so many things can really impact whether or not you develop it.
Let's narrow down on high cholesterol because it is something that I see a lot with clients who want to start working with us. They'll be like, all of a sudden I get in this weight, and then the doctor like took my labs and I have high cholesterol. Now I'm actually really worried.
Mm. Yeah,
So I asked our Instagram followers if they had any questions about this, and we had
oh,
some. Yeah, the first one was kind of related to this. Does dietary intake of cholesterol raise blood cholesterol? So kind of narrowing in on like what we can kind of do about it.
sure. So this is a great question, and it's something that I get asked all the time. Not necessarily. So when we're looking at lowering our cholesterol or that LDL number, there's lots of things that we want to look for. The first one is reducing the saturated fat in your diet. So instead of focusing on reducing cholesterol in your diet, we want to reduce saturated fat. And that's because that saturated fat, which is those solid fats at room temperature. So the butters, the coconut oil is actually a saturated fat, fats that come from bacon and red meats or any type of meat, really. The red meats are just generally higher in saturated fat. We want to decrease those. And that's because those are the ones that are responsible for increasing that LDL number that you might see from your labs. The second part that we want to look at is increasing that HDL number that I just mentioned. So, because HDL helps to lower our LDL, we want to exercise a little bit more. We want to eat more healthy fats like avocado and fish and oils. nuts and seeds, all of those. Those are kind of all going to help balance those two numbers out. As far as cholesterol goes, certain people I found can actually be really sensitive to cholesterol in foods. So, for example, something like eggs, that's a super super controversial thing. Some patients, if they eat lots of eggs, their cholesterol might go up. Other people, they might see it not really make that big of an impact. But what's tricky is that those higher cholesterol foods actually generally are higher in saturated fat as
Mhm.
well. So as we decrease saturated fat in our diet, we're probably going to also decrease cholesterol as we do it. So typically with my heart patients, we eat mostly egg whites and maybe add in some of those like egg yolks mixed in throughout the week. The recommendation on the Mediterranean diet is about 4 per week. So
Mhm.
that's typically what we recommend. But like I said, some people are sensitive to certain high cholesterol foods. But overall, we really want to just decrease that saturated fat in our diet, increase fiber, and work on, increasing that HDL number.
Interesting. I didn't know that about the recommendation, the 4 egg yolks.
Yeah.
Somebody else asked kind of a question that related to this. Do certain foods raise cholesterol, blood pressure a lot more than others? Like, is there specific foods or is it just like generally your lifestyle?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, those foods that are really high in saturated fat are going to be what would raise cholesterol more than others. Actually, higher fiber foods like our fruits and our vegetables and our whole grains actually help to lower. So, cholesterol in our labs are really impacted by what we eat. So, if you do have high cholesterol, it's definitely worth a shot changing your diet and seeing what happens. As far as blood pressure goes, sodium is really the big one there. When we eat a lot of sodium or have a really high sodium diet, that can impact our blood pressure. So, decreasing saturated fat and decreasing sodium, those are the two things I would recommend.
And then somebody else asked, can you decrease cholesterol without meds? I'm eating well, but it's still high. Did you already kind of
Yeah.
answer this, or is there anything else that you could like help this person with?
I would say first and foremost, if your doctor's recommending a medication, I would definitely encourage you to take it. Would have to look at your labs in particular, but sometimes it's so high that,
Yeah.
doing a medication to bring it down while you work on changing your diet is kind of the best way to go. A lot of times I see, a combination of medication and lifestyle change. I will say because if you're in your 20s or 30s, you're younger. So definitely working on the lifestyle change is going to make a big impact for the rest of your life. But yes, I totally have seen this in so many people. Changing their diet, changing their lifestyle, exercising more definitely makes a big impact within like a matter of months, really. A lot of times, if you go to the doctor and they do your lipid panel, they'll take it again in 3 to 6 months. And a lot of times I see that number go down, which is really, really cool without medication. Not to say that's going to happen for every single person. Again, listen to your doctor. I've been seeing a lot more of doctors referring to a dietitian before they put on meds if it's, like a borderline high, which is awesome because, again, building those habits for the rest of your life instead of having to be on a medication for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and it's gonna help other things too. Like, eating more fruits and vegetables and fiber isn't just gonna help with the high cholesterol. It'll also hopefully help with hypertension, and it'll help with like
Yeah.
other prevention of diseases. So I think it's better to get in that habit anyway. Paint a picture of like what it would realistically look like to be eating in a way that would decrease cholesterol. Like maybe thinking too with like people that struggle. So like somebody who's, on the go or whatever, or maybe they want to eat out and you're saying, okay, well, don't eat any more saturated fat. Like what would that look like day to day, do you think?
I would say, and just like with everything that we talk about, taking it like step by step. But overall, like the general heart healthy diet is more of the Mediterranean diet approach, which doesn't mean we eat like Mediterranean food per se, but eating lots of fruits and vegetables, whole grains. Actually, using my plate that we talk about is really a great way to do this because even if you are eating like a protein that's higher in saturated fat, it's still only about a quarter of your plate, filling the rest with those fruits and vegetables and those plant foods. I always encourage, and I'm the vegetarian coach, but I always encourage some more plant based eating. And so, if it's something that's new to you, even just doing that 1 day a week and swapping out your beef with like beans 1 day or just moving more towards chicken and fish, that's a really easy way to start. Especially if you eat out a lot, just ordering chicken and fish instead of beef or pork because those are going to be a lot less saturated fat. Eating more fish in general, too, like 2 to 3 times a week is the recommendation. So I'm definitely not meeting that. I can tell you that right now. It's definitely hard. that those like fattier fish like salmon, those ones are going to be higher in those omega-3s. I try to get at least one serving a week, but it's hard to do that. Let's see what else. Adding in more of your like healthy fats like avocado, cooking with olive oil, snacking on nuts, all of those things. Of course, increasing your fruits and vegetables. And these are all things that we do really on the program too. So increasing fruits and vegetables, that's only going to help with fiber and antioxidants, which antioxidants help actually protect us from, getting that plaque buildup in our arteries. So all of those things can be really helpful. I would pick, if you're like brand new to this, I would pick one and start there and kind of move towards that overall heart healthy plate.
And then what happens if we get told that we have high cholesterol and then we just do nothing about it?
Yeah, so unfortunately, if we have high cholesterol and we do nothing, you always have the risk of it continuing to get higher or staying the same. And of course, that's one of those risk factors of heart disease. So it's not to say that every single person with high cholesterol will have, some sort of heart event, but it definitely puts us at a higher risk. So I would say, because there are so many ways we can change our diet, even just starting with one is really helpful.
Yeah, and the thing that, I didn't think about until somebody told me recently, because both me and David have high cholesterol, and we're both, like, a normal
Oh,
BMI, so it really doesn't have anything to do with
yeah.
weight. But,
No.
somebody was saying, the thing with cholesterol, it's hard is when you start blocking those arteries, like, it doesn't just reverse on its own. Like, it's kind of like that unless you, like, physically get to clean it out. And, like, hypertension, like, maybe if you stop it, that's, pretty good. It's not gonna do super long-term damage, and I also feel like, blockages in your artery just seem like a silent killer. I've just heard so many sad stories about people with parents who I know who had, like, never went to the doctor, didn't know, and then all of a sudden died at, like, 55. And so, for me, it's something that I feel like people should take very seriously.
Yeah.
So I think it's just scary if we think about it like that, and I don't mean to scare people, but it's a scary thing.
It is scary, and yeah, again, not to scare people, but along with the lines of like people thinking this is an older person disease, like I said, even I work in cardiac rehab, which is rehabilitation for anyone who's had a heart event, and I have patients in their 30s in there sometimes. So again, yeah, some people don't even have risk factors. So of course, I'm like gung ho, strong, strong, feel really strongly about prevention. My husband also has high cholesterol, and we
Mm.
eat the exact same, and mine is fine. So, of course, when you mentioned you have it too, like that genetic component, like some people just do produce more cholesterol in their bodies and they have a little bit more. So, that would definitely be like a case where if we do everything we can diet wise, like sometimes medication, is the way to go. And that does decrease it. And that's really important because the last thing we want is it just to be high for years and years and years. And then, yeah, then there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. Let's move on to hypertension because it's another one I see with a lot of clients. I personally can't relate to this one as much, but I think it's still important to talk about. So, one audience question about hypertension was that does sodium intake matter if you don't have hypertension? So I get this a lot. Like,
Yeah.
does eating more sodium? I think there's a confusion that eating more sodium does it cause hypertension? Like, should they be caring about
Mhm.
this?
Yeah, so eating a lot of sodium, I mean, some people might eat a ton of sodium and never have hypertension in their whole life. It
Yeah.
definitely might put you at a higher risk of having it. But I would say it definitely matters because surprisingly, a lot of people think, or I have patients who tell me this all the time, oh, I don't salt my food, so I don't eat a lot of salt. Well, that's really not true because most of the salt in our diet doesn't come from adding it with a salt shaker. It comes from it being already in the food.
Mhm.
So when the high sodium foods, they're mostly packaged, processed, restaurant, out to eat foods, and all of those foods, because they are higher in fat and salt, they're generally just less healthy for us anyway. And so, overall, when we're trying to decrease sodium, we generally eat more healthy anyway. So, I would say, over for the long term, health and just healthy eating. If you are eating really, really high sodium, like 4,000, 5,000 milligrams, you're probably eating a lot of that other stuff too. So I would say it definitely still matters.
Yeah, somebody asked me recently that I knew, she said she, had a heart complication, had to have some stents, and she has hypertension and was trying to figure out how to have a lower sodium diet if I give her some tips, and I was like, mostly the biggest thing you can kinda do is try to kind of make most of your food because the biggest
Yeah,
ways that people get, increased sodium intake without realizing it was, like you said, like, eating out and processed. She's like, "Yeah, I mean, I even thought, like, making a sandwich would be fine, but, like, just because I made it
mm,
at home doesn't mean because the deli meat has a lot." She's like, "I didn't think bread would have a lot and cheese."
yeah,
If we think about it, all that stuff, it's
everything.
preserved with salt, it's flavored with salt, so fruits and vegetables, again, I think is a good way to start working on that.
And, if that's something you're looking at, always looking at the label. I mean, sodium, it breaks my heart every time I have someone with a really, really low heart function who is trying to eat healthy and they're like, oh, I'm eating out and I'm ordering salads. But unfortunately, I mean, if you look at even like salads at Chick-fil-A, it's like over 1,000 milligrams
Yes.
because you have dressing and cheese and croutons and I
Yeah.
mean, all the fun things. So overall, I mean, eating out, there's definitely a way we can do it healthfully, but if you are someone who's really watching sodium, that it's just really hard to do it when we eat out. Um, so yes, you would be very surprised at how high things are in sodium. And yeah, I mean, overall, like if you don't have heart failure, if you don't have high blood pressure, we don't have to be super crazy about it. But like I said, eating super high amount would probably also indicate you're not eating the most healthy things anyway. So
Yes. What would this look like in real life? Like eating a lower sodium diet? I feel like we already said a lot of examples, but maybe we can give one more. Like what would that look like for somebody, yeah, who does like really want to go out to eat or go out to eat with their friends or they like to do DoorDash? Like what would be those like small improvements you think that type of person could make?
sure. So I would say, like, if you're someone who eats out all the time, just aim for like cooking one thing at home, like having one thing a day at home. If you do really like to eat out, the really high sodium things are going to be like your dressings and your sauces. So asking for those on the side can
Mhm.
really help decrease. Ordering like your fresh vegetables, your steamed, asking for it like low seasoned, any type of like fresh food that we can get when we go out to eat or on the go will definitely have less sodium in it as well. I will say, sodium, I know we had another podcast about this, but sodium is also another thing that can affect our weight because of that fluid. It does retain fluid in our body. So I've actually had clients in this program have those weight fluctuations and they're like, wow, I'm actually eating a ton of sodium. And so we're having to work on this too. So it definitely matters for lots of reasons. I've also had a client who, going back to the cholesterol, she actually lowered her cholesterol by following our program. So,
Yay!
yeah, like if you are someone who listens or follows along with like what we do, it's definitely a step in that direction to help lowering those things. So, yeah, I would say with sodium, like don't let it overwhelm you. Just kind of take it step by step, and eating more fresh foods overall will help.
And then what happens if we don't treat it? So again, if we get say somebody says we have hypertension, they're like, well, I don't really need to worry about that for like another 20 years. Like what would that do
Yeah.
to a person?
Yeah, so unfortunately, again, increased risk of heart disease, that coronary artery disease. So yeah, that high blood pressure just it definitely puts a lot of stress on those arteries and veins. So that stress and that damage is what causes that LDL to kind of build up, build that plaque up in our arteries and veins. So I would say like it would definitely be something we would want to address. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and I think another thing a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't even realize for a while that, my dad and my grandpa have hypertension, but I do not, but my
Mm,
granddad had, what do they call it? It's, vascular dementia, which I believe even comes from it's
okay.
like hypertension is a risk factor for developing that type of dementia, so just
Yeah.
another thing that could be potentially preventable because I think a lot of people think a lot of dementia is not.
Yeah.
Um, and then tell me about diabetes and how that is related to all this heart stuff.
Yeah, so actually, like when I was in school, I always thought, heart disease was going to be like the number one thing that I always talked about because it's the number one cause of death. But
Yeah.
I see so many people with diabetes or with the combination, right? So they have like these risk factors on both ends. And diabetes really does impact our risk for heart disease pretty significantly because, like we talked about, that damage if we have that prolonged high blood sugar or that A1C, which you might hear your doctor talk about or test for, if we have that high number, again, it can kind of cause that damage, and so that also puts us at risk for heart disease. So I would say, most of my heart patients also have diabetes, or a good chunk of them do, or like that high A1C, because that is a risk factor. And that's definitely a huge component of preventing that is through nutrition. Like that's a big thing that we can help control and help lower. And so, if you're not familiar with what an A1C is, it kind of just shows us the average blood sugar in in the last 3 months that you have. And so, if you have an average higher blood sugar, that just kind of puts you at risk for developing diabetes. And so, that's another one of those chronic illnesses that we want to try and avoid if at all possible. So, another reason why we want to look at that number.
Yeah, it's interesting how all of it is so related, how it's not like I mean, again, it just goes back to for me, I think of like eating more fruits and vegetables and, exercising and all
Mhm.
that because it just seems like when one domino falls in your body, like all the rest start to like also break
Right.
down. It's not just like this one thing is like kind of broken. So it sounds like you're saying like if we're just kind of like live a healthier lifestyle overall, then we're probably in a pretty good space to avoid a lot of this. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, not to say that like if you have diabetes or that increased A1C, prediabetes, that you're going to develop heart disease. But I just it's very common. I see that a lot. That there might be that risk factor there. So overall, like the number one thing that I see that can really help decrease blood sugars is decreasing those like high sugary foods in your diet, specifically sodas and juices and juice is definitely one of those things that people like. It's marketed as super healthy. Like we grew up drinking juice as kids, and
Yeah.
so it's healthy, but super high in sugar. So I've even had patients who cut out like the soda and juice in their diet, and their A1C decreases quite a bit. So that one is a huge one if you're looking for something just like really easy or simple to kind of work on. Increasing fiber and pairing together like carbohydrates with protein is really helpful. So a big misconception with lowering your A1C or diabetes is that you can't eat carbs. That's not true. So we just want to eat carbs that are higher in fiber and pair them with protein when we can. Again, kind of looking at my plate, eating more of those fiber filled fruits and veggies, and then always having protein and hopefully a lean source of protein and like a healthy carbohydrate.
What about anything else? Are we missing anything else of what we can possibly do to put ourselves in a good position to not get any of these diseases?
Nutrition is first. Physical activity is also a huge one. So physical activity is going to help with blood pressure, cholesterol, and A1C. All of those things is helpful with physical activity. So we definitely can't ignore that. And then stress management. So I think there's a lot of underlying stress in our culture, in our society. Stress isn't really something that people talk about or as something that's like treatable, and it often just goes ignored because it's like, well, we're all stressed out, we're all really busy. But definitely don't ignore being like in a really high stress environment. Not only is that not the best for weight loss, but it's also one of those risk factors for heart disease. So learning how to cope with stress in a healthy way, whether it's like getting enough sleep, exercising, reducing alcohol. A lot of people will kind of use that to relieve stress, but that can also be, something that is related to heart disease. All of those things can definitely help reduce our risk overall. And stress management is just something that we don't talk about enough.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm all about the blue zones. I don't like put it in our program because there's not a whole lot of research, but with those people, they find that in all those different countries of the people who live the longest, they also find that they like have the lowest stress. I mean, I don't know how we can really relate to that, but I think there's a lot
Yeah.
to be said about trying to reduce stressful situations in your life or offloading
Yeah.
things at work if you can, delegating and just making sure you get enough rest. And yeah, how those healthy stress management system and get yourself a good therapist.
Yes, yes, always an advocate for therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I think stress not only does it impact our nutrition, but because it's such a risk factor, I mean, can definitely impact our blood pressure and just overall day to day like well being.
Mhm.
Um, the big thing. Even I feel like in where I work in cardiac rehab, like I said, and we know stress is a risk factor, but it's not always the first thing that we address. So we do have like stress counseling and everything like that, but people are not always apt to want to talk about it or think that that could be something that they could, work on to help reduce your risk. So, yeah, let's normalize not being stressed out.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lacey. By the time this will go
Yeah.
live, you will be accepting clients. So if anybody wants to work
Yes.
with Lacey, you can. I know people have probably been waiting for a while.
Yes.
But if you are interested in doing a deeper dive in any of these topics, because I feel like we kind of breezed over them and there's so much more we could say, please like let us know on Instagram, or you could even like respond to the email that we sent out. We could even talk about labs, because a lot of clients will be like, my doctor said I had this lab, but I really don't know what this means, or the difference between all of them, or medications, or just pitfalls when it comes to like real life situations for nutrition interventions. And also make sure to check out our email list. I want to plug that in because we talked a lot about low sodium foods, low fat foods, and we have dietitian picked and approved recipes on there. You can find the recipe list. It's free. We send out a couple of recipes every week on our website. The address will be the millennialnutritionist.com/links, and you can see the sign up for the recipe link. But that is it. Thank you so much for joining us, Lacey.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you so much for listening to the Millennial Nutritionist podcast. For daily weight loss tips and nutrition information, you can find us on Instagram at the.millennial.nutritionist and on TikTok at millennial.nutritionist. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend who needs encouragement on their health journey. See you in the next episode.